has 17,000 followers, so come and check it out. I do offer classes and webinars of my own, and there's all the information is on my website regarding that. My Twitter handle, if that's interesting, is Caitlin Kelly NYC. So 2 resources I want to share with you before I jump in. I've got lots to share with you. One is the May 2017 issue of INC, the business magazine. They did a special issue on negotiating, and there's a phenomenal amount of really good information. It's so much I couldn't just cram it all in here. We've got a lot to talk about right now. But Inc. magazine, May 2017 issue, there's some really good stuff in there. And another book that I really want to recommend, I've read it and I tell everyone to read it. It's called Women Don't Ask. And it was written probably about 10 years ago. It's not a new book, but it's a really interesting book. It's LaChevre and Babcock, Women Don't Ask. You can find it in any bookstore or on Amazon, of course. And what it really addresses is something we're going to talk about today, which is not simply, oh, here's your contract and here's what you need to do to negotiate your contract, but it's really how do you get over the fear, and there are very real fears that we have as women about negotiating and the pushback that we get, and we do get it, and we often get it from other women. We get it from men, of course, we get it from people that we're negotiating with, but there's a whole emotional matrix from which we negotiate, and I'm going to address some of that today before I get into nitty-gritties of the contract and what you do when you get this 17-page single space. That's what a book contract looks like. And you just sit there and go, oh my God, help. And I ignored mine for about a week until finally my agent said, deal with this, right? So only to say, it's intimidating for everybody. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's always a little intimidating. So take a deep breath and know that that's just human to say, oh God, I have to ask and ask for more and keep doing that, and yes, you do. I was really lucky in that I grew up in Toronto. I'm originally from Canada, and I've lived in New York for a while, about 20 years. I grew up in a freelance family. So I had a huge advantage, which I've only really realized in later life. I was never told, get a job, be a doctor, be a lawyer. In fact, it was really be a creative professional like my father, who's an award-winning filmmaker, my mother, who was a journalist and a broadcaster, my stepmother, who wrote for television. Nobody had a paycheck. Nobody had a pension. Nobody had paid sick days or vacation days. My point is, we only got what we asked for. And so that was a really powerful lesson for me to watch my family, and we wore cashmere, and we went to Europe, and we drove decent used cars, and we lived in a house, and we weren't homeless, and we didn't eat ramen every year. Some years were better than others. It's really important that you internalize as a creative professional that you have skills, that you have talent, that you have experience, and this is something that you can sell into the intellectual marketplace. You really have to hold on to that. It's very easy in our culture to say, well, I'll get a job, or my friend works at the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, or they have a job and I don't have a job. You don't need a job. You need the confidence to say, I'm going to sell my skills. And the sales process is part of what you'll be doing when you're negotiating. So I freelanced right out of university. In university, I was studying English. I'd never studied journalism. I taught it. And at the University of Toronto, which is a big, impersonal, difficult, challenging place to go to school. And I freelanced my way from second-year university. I had a newspaper column in the Globe and Mail as an undergraduate. I was paying my bills. I was living alone. This was not, Cancun money. This was, I need to pay bills and buy grocery money. And so at the age of 19, and some of you are young and starting out, I was negotiating. I had to go in and ask for things and ask for more of things and ask for better contracts. This is something I've done for a long time, and it's never that easy. So you have my sympathy in any fear that you're bringing to this. So basically, you have to ask. They don't give you what you don't ask for, right? And a really important piece of this is, obviously, this is a business, right? And one of the things that's really challenging, especially in America, where there's virtually no government support for the arts, and we're about to lose it, is this fantasy that, oh, well, you enjoy it, so you don't really need money. Do you, dear? Couldn't you just do this for free? No, you can't do this for free because the rent isn't free. Your college student loan isn't free. So you're not going to give things away because this is a business. They're running a business. You're selling them a product. We don't like to think of that as creative people. It's a product I'm creating. It's both. So let's really hang on to that as a way of thinking. Just because you enjoy it doesn't mean it isn't work, and it doesn't mean it doesn't have value, right? Guys on Wall Street, they make a lot of zeros, they enjoy it, they get really well paid. Just because we enjoy it doesn't mean we need to sacrifice a good living because of that pleasure, because it's artistic, because it's creative. It's a really important thing to remember when people start to make fun of it or dismiss it or say that it's worth less. It is not. One of the things you want to think about is that when you come to a negotiation, you are coming into a situation where two people are trying to get to a goal. If you ask for a lot and it's too early in your career, that might not work as well as you want it to. That's a bit of tough love. Sorry, but that's the truth. So sometimes you could be going into a negotiation going, well, I really want X, and they're offering you Y. And you can push and push because it's not fair. The reality is you have got to be ruthlessly honest with yourself to say, have I done enough work? Do I have the track record? Do I have the reputation as being accurate and on time and amazing and resourceful? Because if you've only done 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or maybe 10 stories or assignments, whether print or photography, maybe that's not yet enough to get the higher rate. So just something to think about. You're aiming for it always. It can take time. You also want to think about your marketing and sales. One of the challenges of what we do, and again, I'm going to get to nitty-gritties of negotiating more, is we're in a sales business. Again, people say, I'm a writer, I'm a photographer. Yes, that's what we do. And I began my career as a photographer, so I understand that part of things as well. But the fact is, if you are not constantly marketing and creating a funnel, and literally a funnel where you have 35 prospects or 25 or 500 or whatever, because it's going to funnel into the ones that come through. And a lot of us are so busy on a passion project, God bless those, that, oh, the rent, oh, my student loan payment, oh, my car payment, oh, where'd the money go? If you're not filling it constantly with sales calls and emails and reaching out to new clients and former clients, you're not going to have enough paid work coming through so that when you need that money, it's there and you don't have to negotiate from need or from desperation, but from what you are actually bringing in. So think about marketing and sales all the time. It will strengthen you in those moments of negotiation. You're not negotiating from weakness, you're negotiating from strength. Another thing, and this is really important, this is for writers, but also for photographers, we're in an era which is different from when I began, that's largely digital, and as we know, digital pays generally very badly. And I see a lot of writers saying, I can't negotiate, all they're offering is $50 or $100 or $200 or whatever. It's rarely more than $400 or $500. I don't think I've ever seen more than that for a digital purchase. And I guess I want to say something, again, a bit tough love, which is nobody's forcing you to work only for digital. I would urge you, if that's all you're doing and feeling scared and helpless and frustrated, to do agency work, to do nonprofit work, to look in academia, to really broaden your search and fill the funnel more widely with better paying work. If you have to do digital for other reasons, that's a decision you'll make. But I don't think just constantly sort of saying, oh, I only make this and that's all they offer. That's not a position of strength. So I want you to reconsider that. And one more final thought before I get into nitty-gritties. And again, and there's no shame in this whatsoever, you just might need a job. And I don't mean any old job. Do whatever's necessary. Dog walking, babysitting, bartending. Do what's necessary to make sure that your bills are paid on time. You are not panicking. I worked retail. My last job was the New York Daily News. That's a big newspaper. It's a big job. And I lost my job in 06, and the recession hit hard in 07, and I went and folded T-shirts for the North Face for $11 an hour. Okay, and I wasn't 16, and I wasn't 30. So if I can do it, you can do it, because I needed cash. It became my second book. That was never the goal. So if you need to have just steady, solid income so you negotiate more effectively, not feeling scared, please do that. There's no shame in that. We all do it. Just do what you have to do to take care of yourself. Now the advice, the next bit is on photography, so that's primarily where we're going to go next for about the next 10 minutes. This is from Mary F Calvert, F as in Frank, at maryfcalvert.com, who is an extraordinary female photojournalist who was generous enough to just share some information and advice for you with me. And she was the 2013 Canon Female Photojournalist. She was a 2-time Pulitzer Prize finalist for feature photography, and this year won a 2017 Guggenheim, among many other prizes. So she was very generous to help us out. Here's some of her thoughts about negotiating. And I love the first one. She says, I don't use the word freelance. She said, I don't want it anywhere near my name, that word free. I use the word independent. She said, the single greatest error that independent photographers make is not knowing the value and market rate of their work. She said, I think a lot of photographers get pressured or even swindled into working for exposure, we know that, for rates well below market value, and a lot of the time because they're young and inexperienced. And you have to weigh your choices very carefully to make sure you're getting something tangible out of that kind of transaction. And I agree with her. She says, if an organization can pay salaries, rent, electricity, buy computers, they've got money to pay you for your work. Exposure, we know, is not an effective way to do this. She said, you want to know the basics of what certain clauses and contracts actually mean, and to make sure you can fight for yourself effectively, instead of caving in and automatically signing your rights away because you're scared and it's an offer and oh my gosh. Make sure you're armed with knowledge so you can ask this client good questions, find out how they're going to use your photographs, making sure they're not buying more than they really need to. She said that way you're educating your client and you're negotiating an arrangement that benefits you both. She wants you to know the fair market price of an assignment or a stock photo. I'm going to tell you how you're going to do that. You want to find out what budget your client is working with. You could ask for $5,000 if they're coming in with $500 and that's all they've got. That's not a great negotiation. You need to figure out where you're starting from. She says, don't be afraid to question or challenge clauses in a contract. She said, I've been happily surprised when clients have been willing to work with me and adjust certain things. It will never happen, she says, if you don't just ask. Now, how do you know what a fair market rate is? This is the answer. You join organizations. So she's a member of the National Press Photographers Association and the White House News Photographers Association. And she said, I plan to renew my ASMP membership as well. She said, there's a lot of value of membership in these organizations. The resources for pricing, contracts, negotiation, and legal assistance are all vital for my business. And she's a legend. So if she's making use of this, you should as well. Really important point, she said, sometimes you just have to walk away. If you feel the client is being exploitive, wanting you to work for free, owning all your images, places no value on you, or has no respect for you and your work, that's what you want to not do. Just say, thank you so much. You don't have to be aggressive or angry. Just, I'm sorry, it's not a fit. And we've all done it, and we all have to do it. You have to make that choice sometimes, which is why you need money in the bank and or clients that you can rely on. The 3 best tips for better negotiating that Mary offered, she said, first of all, learn everything about business practices, including pricing, and know what a contract looks like so you know what you're talking about. Don't get defensive and aggressive. Negotiate in a calm and respectful manner, and do your best to work with clients. It's a partnership. Ideally, you're creating a relationship that's going to continue and going to keep bringing you work. A couple more thoughts, again, on photography before we move to writing. This is from another legend, Mickey Osterreicher, who is General Counsel of the National Press Photographers Association. And Mickey, who is an attorney, says, consult an attorney. It's important. Draft your own contracts and draft them with your own attorney. And so when a contract is offered to you, have it reviewed by a lawyer who specializes in intellectual property. In other words, not your brother-in-law who does real estate or your sister who does malpractice, insurance. Somebody who understands the language and the terms and how this is going to work for you. How do you find that lawyer, and how can I afford them? Mickey says, most local bar associations have lawyer referral services, and he says if you're an NPPA member, we can refer you to one. Generally, these are attorneys who've decided that they're going to work this way, and their costs are somewhat lower as you come in. Very important point, know what it costs you to run your business. This is great. Mickey says we have a cost of doing business calculator right on our website, so NPPA. So for your gas, your car, all your insurances, everything. So that's just brilliant. So make use of that. He says every contract has 3 elements: their offer, the consideration, the money, the rights, etc. And at that point, you can make a counteroffer. That's the negotiation. We've only got $500 for this assignment. Well, you know, that's a little low for me. I normally get $750. Do you have any wiggle room? Right? There's a language that you'll get comfortable with. And maybe you get $600 or $625. It's more money than you had 5 minutes earlier, right? And then there's acceptance. When you've both decided, we agree on this, these are the terms, okay? Very important point Mickey makes. He says, read the terms of service for anywhere on social media that you post your images as a photographer, because most people don't read those things, right? We don't. We're lazy, we're in a hurry. They may have all kinds of rights that you just signed away. So be very cautious about that. Do not sign what's called a contract of adhesion. Sounds like a Band-Aid, but it's a bad thing. And Mickey says, it's basically a contract that says, take it or leave it. We're not budging, we're not moving, that's it. He just says, walk away. And you may say, well, how can I? Because your funnel is full, you have other work coming in. You don't have to work with a bad contract, okay? And by talking to other people, by joining those organizations, by having a network, having a posse, you'll hear what other people are offering or not offering. And that's really important. You need to understand where you fit into the industry. You can't just operate in isolation. It is absolutely dangerous to do that. You cannot negotiate effectively without knowledge. Final point from Mickey, a really important one. Make sure to register your images with the US Copyright Office. It has a 3-month look back, and you can bulk register. And he said their website is very, very helpful. So that's really just a focus there on photography. And I want to switch a little bit more into talking about writing, basically the same principles. Networking is crucial, absolutely essential for writers. The American Society of Journalists and Authors, ASJA.org, is a very helpful organization. You may not be able to join immediately. You need some credentials, some clips, some work accumulated. I was on their board for years. I've done a lot of work with them. I've spoken at their conferences. It's extraordinary. And most of my work is now coming through people I've met, through ASJA and their referrals. So come to our conference. It's every spring in New York City. Yes, it's expensive. It's worth it. It's a tax write-off. SPJ, obviously. FLX, Freelance Success, is an online group that helps writers find work, freelance work. The Neiman Conference, basically go to any conference that you can get to. There are student rates. You can get scholarships. There's ways to make it work, because what you're doing is you're networking. You're finding out, oh, that magazine just closed. Oh, that editor just moved. Oh, they're cutting their rate or they're boosting their rate. That's where you get information face to face, not just virtually, which is great. Not the same, not the same. A couple of basics again, when you as a writer are signing a contract, what rights are you giving up? Because there's always something. What money is being offered to me? Okay, and this is really important. When will I be paid? Now, the standard for years has always been 30 days, a month, and that's after invoicing, right? So you could get an assignment in September, you don't hear back, you turn in your edits. It can take months to even get to the point of, yep, it's accepted, everything's cool, even digitally sometimes, which is shocking to me that it's so slow. So if you're only being paid 90 days after publication, 3 months later, you could be looking at a 6-month window. I'm sorry, did your rent wait 6 months? Probably not. So you really want to think through when that money is being offered. Is there a way around that? Can you negotiate a shorter payment term? Can you negotiate, which you often can, direct deposit? Is that something they can do? Can they FedEx a check to you? I've asked for that. I've gotten it. Okay, there are ways to make this work better for you, not just for them. Okay. Kill fees. When you're a writer, sometimes the story just isn't going to make it. And you've worked really hard. You've done all the research. Things happen. I've had stories killed. It is not a fun experience. You are going to lose some money. Only in one instance in my career have I been paid 100% of the check. It was a very large check. It was almost 5 figures for a story that, through no fault of my own, had to die. The protagonist, I'd spent a month on this piece, got tangled up in some ethical issues, and that was the end of that. It wasn't my fault, but that's what happens. You want to have a kill fee, because if suddenly they just don't like it, you've put in all that time and energy and money, and you've got to be paid. It's often 25%, which is terrible. You should try for 50%. Some people get 100%. That depends on reputation. That depends on experience. Okay. The next part, 4 parts to this contract negotiation. What are the promises I am making to the publisher? And the last part, what are the penalties I face if I break them? The language is now atrocious. It's called indemnification, which means that if anybody anywhere ever decides to sue for that story, you're going to take on the legal costs, right? Like, we've got so much money to burn. So you want to insert into your contract language whenever possible. For example, where it says, I won't include libelous material, or I won't breach a copyright. So you insert the words, to the best of my knowledge and belief. That's what you insert. You just write it in on the paper, whether you send it PDF or you send paper, right? So you want to be aware of that. I won't get into all the gritty details of this, but you want to go to asja.org. We do have a contracts committee. They are super helpful. So if there's something very specific that you're feeling very shaky about, that's a place to go. Before you start negotiating, 3 P's. Prepare for your negotiation. Think about what you really want, what you really need. Practice, and persevere. The practice is really important, and one of the points that was made to me when I was researching this is sometimes you just want to negotiate for a story or an assignment or something that you're not that attached to. Yes, you want the money. Yes, you'll be professional. But if it doesn't happen, you won't be heartbroken. You won't be homeless. You won't be panicked. And the point is, it's a practice. You need to get used to the language. Can you do any better? I normally get a slightly higher rate for that. Do you have any wiggle room? Whatever the language is, you need to get comfortable with it. You can't be shaky. You can't be nervous. You can't just jump at the first offer. That's not a negotiation. That's capitulation. Big difference. And persevering is really important because, frankly, sometimes they won't negotiate. They just won't. That's the only budget we have. Take it or leave it, whatever the language is. And then you have to really decide, do I want to do this? And sometimes you do. Sometimes you're like, okay, that's okay, because you're getting enough out of it of other things that you wanted. So you're not just giving up. You're not just rolling over. There are things that you can ask for in a negotiation. The assumption is always, oh, it's always money. I've got to have more money. Well, maybe they don't have more money, but maybe they can give you access to an intern for help, access to a researcher for help. They could pay for a translator or a fixer if you need to work in another language, which we sometimes do. You could ask them to pay for transcription, which costs money because you don't want to do that because that takes time. That costs us money, right? You could ask them for a different set of rights. What happens frequently with young, newer writers is, here's the all rights contract. Now, those of us who've networked and done this for a while know there's something called FNASR, First North American Serial Rights, which means they're buying one-time use. They can't just always own it forever in perpetuity. Film rights, broadcast rights, documentary, a book you might want to write. You don't want people snatching up every right ever. Now, on some pieces you don't care. And truthfully, I've written pieces, I'm like, not a big deal. Here, work for hire, no problem. But I know what it is I want to do with my work. You want to think that through. But that's a negotiation. That's something you want to really think through as you head into that negotiation, okay? So a couple more thoughts, then we're almost done. One of the things you want to think about, and this is really important, this is from a fellow Canadian named Devon Smiley, great name. Devon is a professional negotiator who lives in Montreal, and she spoke at the ASJA conference this year. That's where I met her, which is why you need to come to the conference. And she said something really smart about negotiating in general, which is it's always nervous making. We're always a little intimidated, and what if they say no, and I'm asking for too much, and or maybe I'm asking for too little, and it's a nervous moment. I assure you, that's very human. And she said, so be aware of that nervousness, because when we're nervous, we tend to jump to get rid of the nervousness, right? We want to get rid of our anxiety as quickly as possible. But that means you're moving too quickly. So you want to slow down. Can I get back to you? When somebody makes an offer to you, whatever that is, you can say, I say this all the time, when do you need an answer from me? It's rarely 6 seconds from now, right? So you have time. Depending what it is, you go to your attorney, you go to your contacts, you go to your network. Does this sound right? Oh no, they paid me twice that much last year. Good to know. You need time to review the offer, right? So you don't say yes too quickly. A really important point, and this is from Gwen Moran. And Gwen is a massively successful freelance writer who works for lots of people. She writes for business magazines mostly, And she says, very basic. This is crucial for everyone who freelances. Figure out your hourly rate. Now, how do you do that? You decide how many billable hours a year do I want to work. So 2 weeks paid vacation, not enough for me, but that's a basic, right? 2 weeks sick leave, we all get sick, our kids get sick, our pets get sick, our parents get, something's going to happen. You're going to need some time not working. That's not vacation, right? Do you want to work nights and weekends? Some people are okay, some people are not. Figure out the hours. So working off of her statistic of 1,400 hours a year, billable. For example, if you want to make $65,000 a year, which is a nice chunk of change, $46.50 an hour, every hour. That's what you need to make. If you want to make $85,000, you're going to be making $61 every hour. If you want to make $121,000, excuse me, $120,000, $86 an hour. Now, bearing in mind, and anybody freelancing knows this, and I know this very well, you have a lot of time spent on what I call admin, right? Because you are the CIO, the CEO, the CFO, the janitor. You have to go to Staples to get paper. You have to buy, something for your camera. You have to go to a conference. You need to invoice. You need to read. You need to see what's happening in the industry. We're not always producing all the time. So that dead time has to be factored in because the bills are there all the time, right? So something you want to think about is the next hour that we're dicking around on social media, guilty as charged. We all do it, right? We're isolated, we're working alone at home. If it's $86 that flew out of your pocket, you might slow down the social media use just a little bit because you're now exquisitely aware of the value that you have placed on your own time. It's really important as a business person to think about that, right? Because that's what business people do. So one of the things she wants to think about as you come to negotiation, says Gwen, is what's your value? What is it that you do better than anybody else, right? And yes, there's thousands of people competing with us. We know that. Same for me. It never changes. So what is it you do really well? Maybe you have language skills. I speak fluent French. I speak Spanish. I've lived in 5 countries, so I have a more global perspective on the way that I approach my stories. To some clients, that's valuable. To others, it's not, right? So think about what it is that you bring. A language skill, foreign experience, athletic ability. Maybe it's a sports story and you do that sport and you know it inside out. I used to cover sailing for the New York Times because I was a competitive sailor. I raced on people's sailboats. It was fun, but I turned it into a specialty, which got me work for the New York Times. Not a bad thing, okay? What is the customer value? Obviously, that's really important. And the really important final point I want to leave you with is really, what's your walkaway point? Again, doesn't have to be angry, doesn't have to be, some freaking, sort of freak out moment. It's, thanks, it's not a great fit. Love to talk to you when your budget gets bigger. And if it's not money, again, thank you so much for the offer. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for thinking of me. Not a great fit. And if it really is a decent fit for somebody else, refer them on. That's a great thing. That's good karma, right? That's what we want to be doing. We want to be building our networks, helping other people do their jobs better, because my referrals are helping me. Your referrals are going to help other people. Not everything is a fit for us at all times. So I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for paying attention and thanks for listening. I hope this is helpful. You can reach out to me through my website, CaitlinKelly.com. Again, I do offer classes and webinars of my own. I do one-on-one coaching, Skype, phone, email, and in person. I live just north of New York City. So if you're in the area or you're visiting, I've got a client coming in next week. We're going to do some coaching face-to-face, and I've done that several times. I'm happy to do that. I really enjoy it. So thanks for your time.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Caitlin. That was wonderful. We really appreciate it. And first of all, we actually had a comment, and a girl named Crystal said thank you for being honest about how you got to where you are today, because not a lot of people do that, and I think that's very important as well. So thank you for that. The first question would be, you talked about networking. And sometimes with networking, we build relationships and keep them with people who are sometimes toxic, somewhat I find, especially as women, we're kind of conditioned to be very nice. And what would you say if you felt like, to those of us who are younger and don't have as many contacts in the field and who sometimes aren't sure when it's right to walk away, what would you tell some of us what to do there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And yes, those relationships do exist, and I've had them. I think it's challenging because when you're young and you're starting out, you think, oh, I really need this person and they're powerful, and what if I annoy them and they'll tell all their friends? And I think one of the most important things to remember is not everybody's going to help us. Just because they're powerful and they're connected and they know what they're doing, it doesn't mean that they're going to be useful to us. And so we can sometimes cling to their power and their connections and think, oh, that person's really going to help me because they know the editors, at the New York Times or wherever it is that you want to go. They might not be the right person. And again, it's a bit repetitive. The more you build your networks, the more you can talk to people and say, so I was working with so-and-so. This was not a good experience for me, however you want to express it to them. And they might say, oh my God, yeah. Oh, yeah, that person has a reputation, so no problem. So you're not crazy. You know that this person has a larger reputation beyond your immediate interaction with them. And then you can say, okay, do you know anybody else there? It's interesting how these networks work. I literally started with the New York Times, and this is crazy, by calling a friend in New Orleans. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but that's exactly how it happened. I came to New York. I didn't know anybody. It was a recession. I didn't go to school in America. I had zero contacts, friends, family, nothing. I was starting from scratch. Not a ton of fun. And I was 30 years old. And I called somebody I'd been on a fellowship with, Alice Driver, talked a lot about the value of fellowships. What we're really talking about are networks, right? Called up this guy. I hadn't seen him in, at that point, 7 or 8 years, quite a while. We weren't close friends. And I just said, do you know anybody at the New York Times? He knew one person. And I started writing not glamorous, not well paid book reviews, very, very short on really dry subjects, because I said, let's get started. But the point is, that was my first connection. And I won't mince words, that particular person, who I will never name, was not a particularly good person to work for. And I won't say a lot more than that. It was a start, and I'm glad I got it. But I've now moved on to other editors, many other editors at the Times, more than a dozen, in lots of different sections for 20 years. And they've all been terrific, I mean, except for one or two, very rarely. That one person wasn't great. So it's going to happen. And I think you just have to sort of say, oh, well, that's just sort of business. That's the nature of business. We're going to have amazing bosses and not great bosses. We're going to have some amazing contacts and some not so happy ones. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, but you need the confidence to say, I'm a resilient woman, I'm a resourceful woman, I know I'm okay, my network tells me my impressions are not crazy, so I'm going to move on. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think that's really important. I cannot overstress, and I'm being repetitive, the value of what I call my posse, because they shore you up, they give you strength, they will help you in those moments when you just think, oh my God, I've pissed off this person, or they're abusive to me, and they've got all this power, and that person can say, oh, move on. It's okay. Get the tattoo that says onward, really, because that's what we do.
And what advice would you give to people for, you've been in this industry a long time. What are some of the best practices for building those relationships and keeping those relationships with editors?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, this will sound silly. So I'm Canadian. You'll think, oh, she's so smarmy. But I'm going to be, again, very honest. I'm very straightforward. Stay in touch. And I'll give you one example. And this may sound silly, but so there was an editor I was working with, and it wasn't some hugely lucrative relationship. It was maybe a story a year. It wasn't a high prestige magazine. In other words, I won't mince words. It's not somebody that everybody else would suck up to, and like cling to because, oh, that's an editor at Oprah, whatever the big, we all know the big books, right? But she was really lovely and really smart, and the stories were fun, and it was nothing but a lovely experience. And then she had a very serious illness. Now, thank God she's fine. And I kept checking in with her every couple of, I don't know, sort of 4, 5, 6 months. And I guess maybe we'd become Facebook friends, so I knew that about her. And I would just check in every 3 or 4 months. How are you doing? I'm thinking about you, like as a human being. And there's no more work. The magazine's closed. She's not there anymore. This week, which is, I don't know, 5 years later, 6, 7 years later, I turned to her for a reference for a fellowship for the second or third or fourth time. I mean, she's one of my go-to editors for that. I didn't write her letters when she was ill so I could get that from her. I did that because I'm a human being and she's a human being. And you know what? We're all human beings. So don't just look at your editors as this month's money or next week's fellowship or my greatest clip or, oh, I can get this out of them, because that doesn't work. I'll give you another example. You can laugh, and I'm fine with that. I finally got an assignment from a magazine that I literally had wanted to work for a decade. And you think, oh, everything's in my reach. Wouldn't that be nice? And the minute that I got it, and again, you'll go, she's crazy. I have personalized stationery with my name on it, and it's quite beautiful, and it's not expensive. It's $100. It's a tax deduction. And I wrote a thank you note on personal stationery with a stamp and mailed it, snail mail, to the editor to say, I am so excited. I can't wait to do this. I don't do that all the time. I mean, you know, sometimes it's just straight business and on you go. But this was a really big deal for me. And, you know, it's a grace note. So however old-fashioned that sounds, imagine how many other people are not sending a note on personal stationery and thanking somebody, because that's a grace note. It's an unusual thing to do these days. Maybe it's an old-fashioned thing to do. So what? My attitude is be the person that they want to come back to. And no, not every relationship will last. I've had relationships, you know, I'm not happy to say that, where sometimes it hasn't lasted. You know, it hasn't been a great fit, or there was friction or whatever. Sometimes it happens. But the ones that do last are very important to me. And again, this sounds unlikely, but it's true. I'm still in touch with my very first editor, and we're going back a long time to Canada when I started writing for national magazines. We're Facebook friends, and it still means the world to me when I'll post a link to a story and she'll say, good on you, you know, because she's gotten to see my development, and that's something that we love. I've been an editor myself at magazines, and I help lots of younger writers, and I want to see what they're up to, and it is a thrill. I was at the NPPA when Alex Wroblewski, who's a young friend, won the Best Student Award, and I was so happy to be there and to cheer for him and to whistle and hoot and holler. So the relationships that you create can go for a long way. I met Alex through the New York Times Student Journalism Institute, and that was, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago when I taught there. So once you do have a relationship that is fruitful and is pleasant, be a human being. Stay in touch, send Christmas cards, check in, and not in a like, hey, you know, I need an internship. Like, okay, we get that. It's very basic. The more human you are, we've got former students who come and literally sleep on our sofa, and we don't have kids, and we're happy to have them, and we love them, and we encourage them, and we stay in touch for years. It's a relationship. It's human. So I don't think it's as complicated as some people fear that it is, but it's also a numbers game. Not everybody is going to want to be that personal. They're too busy, they're too tired, they're overwhelmed. That's okay. It's a percentage. You don't need everybody to be your bestie. But when you need that fellowship app, or you need your graduate school app, or your reference, or whatever it's going to be, yeah, you do need them. So think about a small pool of tight relationships.
No, that's very true. And the final question for you is, you know, you were saying that before you go and pitch these larger outlets, you have to make sure your skills are up to par. What advice would you give to people who feel that they need to basically get a little better before they go for those bigger names?
Yeah, it's great advice. Selfishly, I'd say take one of my webinars, come get some coaching from me. Sorry, I have to do that. The standard advice, which is not going to make people happy, is it can take time. I mean, that really isn't something people want to hear. I understand we're in a frenzied culture and we all want it to happen yesterday because we're ambitious and excited, and I get that. I really do. But I started writing professionally at 19. I got hired into my first newspaper job when I was 26. That's a long time. That's a long time. Not many people are going to want to wait that long, because most people don't apply for newspaper jobs when they're 19, but I did because I was ambitious and eager. And then by the time they hired me, I had freelanced for that paper an enormous amount, so they knew what they were getting. A lot of it is, it's really as basic as your track record. So you need to, and again, it's very cliche, produce amazing work. It could be your passion project, you know, keep your blog up to date, keep your website up to date, keep your networks up to date. Do amazing work. You know, even if this, I mean, you'll laugh when I tell you this, but I mean, I'll work on stories. I just finished a story last week that was not high prestige, it was adequate money, but, and I worked really hard. It was one of those, oh my God, I can't believe it's a quicksand story. Like, there's just way too much work for the money story. But there's a bigger story in it that I think needs reporting, and I'm applying for a fellowship out of it. So sometimes the thing that looks least attractive or least alluring or least prestigious or whatever your values are can actually be a very rich source of something else. My book came out of a retail job. Who knew that folding t-shirts would get me my second book that got some really nice reviews and I think has helped my career? I didn't do it for that. So sometimes you have to really kind of be honest with yourself and say, I need to build slowly. I need to build a long sort of track record. And it doesn't have to take 7 years, of course. But you want to think about who you're writing for. You want to think about, this is really difficult. Sometimes the people that are the most demanding of you, and you get off the phone, literally, that editor I'm still friends with, no lie. I used to cry. I was young. She was very tough. She was very tough. And I get off the phone in tears. Now we're friends because I wasn't willing to walk away and say, wah, wah, poor me, she was mean to me. What I said to myself was, you're running for a national magazine, girl. You're 19. You're lucky. She's teaching you and you're getting paid for that. So I think you really have to reframe the experience of criticism, of feedback. Obviously, if they're abusive, go away. But abusive doesn't mean this lead sucks or this kicker is weak. I mean, if somebody's giving you constructive, helpful criticism, take it. You know, I just did a piece for this huge magazine I'd wanted to write for a decade, and I had to do some revisions. I had to do some re-reporting. I'm not bad at what I do. Did I like that? Well, I don't care. The end goal is I want my editors happy. I want a great clip. I want a relationship, please, that continues to get more work through those editors that I have done that extra mile for. And I'm still going the extra mile. I've done this for a long time. I'm still going the extra mile. So if you get there and sort of get all hand flappy and say, oh, I can't, and I'm too busy, and oh, I don't want to, that's fine, because I'll take your spot. Your competitors who are willing to outwork you, that's the truth. They'll be happy to claim your spot. So just keep showing up with, you know, the sort of eager beaver mindset of, hell yeah, I'm on it. I'm going to give you my best. And even if the money's not great, you made that commitment, okay? You signed that contract, you agreed to this. And sometimes, yes, it is much more work than you wanted and anticipated. And you're just like, oh, God, right? This is an important point. I want to finish with this. It's also a negotiation. So one of these stories that even as I was reporting it for a very set fee that was not particularly high, I started pushing back. Now, that's a delicate dance, and you might not want to do it, and it might not work. But the editor kept saying, and here's more contacts, and here's more sources, and I kept saying, I can't do more. And I would keep her in touch. I would email her every 2 or 3 days. That's unusual. I would normally not do that. But this was a story that was ballooning out of control for the same set amount of money. In other words, even after the assignment and the contract were signed, there was an ongoing negotiation to say, this is as much as I can do. I can't do more than this. I'm giving you my best. I'm happy to give you my best. Here's where I've been. Here are the 10 sources I've already, spoken to. But there's a limit. So sometimes the negotiation isn't finished when the contract is signed. And yes, it's scary because we don't want to push back. And again, that's a decision that we all make individually. And again, it can be very respectful. It's boundary setting. Boundary setting is scary. There's no way past that. It's scary, frankly, for a lot of us at any point in our careers. It's not what women are socialized to do. We're socialized to be nice and be helpful and go broke doing it. So don't be that person. Don't be too nice.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful. Thank you guys all for tuning in. I know this is our last talk, and we appreciate your support, and we really hope this has been helpful. And just if you can make sure you reach out to Caitlin, thank her for all her time and hard work. We really appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, okay? Have a great day, guys. Bye, Caitlin.
Thanks, Shannon. Bye.